Hello, everyone. Hope you're getting snacks. Thanks for coming out, everyone. This is the second lecture in our fall lecture series. So we are Science in the News. We're the ones who put on this lecture series. We're a graduate student group at Harvard that exists for two reasons. The first one, to make science accessible to people such as yourselves. And the second reason that we're here is to train graduate students such as ourselves to become better communicators of science, whether it's through spoken presentations or blog articles or podcasts. We have a bunch of different initiatives. So you are sitting in our, the first event series that we started 20 years ago. I say we, but obviously Express comes before us. This is our 20th year in existence. Have these weekly seminars here in the fall semester, and then the spring semester we move things to the Cambridge campus. So hopefully you guys will be willing to trek over there in the spring. But we also have a ton of other stuff that we offer. We have a great blog on our website, which if you pick up the flyers up here, our website is on here, and our blog comes out with several articles a week. You can follow us on Facebook or something and get the blog that way. And that's all written and edited by grad students. We also have, like I said, a podcast called Sit and Listen, S-I-T-N, Sit and Listen. And my events that we run is called Science by the Pint, where we bring labs to bars. Right now we have 2 locations in Somerville. I will say that while it is beer themed, they're both bars where you can get it if you're under 21, you just can't partake in the alcoholic pint. But we bring a whole lab so that you can have one-on-one conversations, so we do almost like dating style event where you can sit and actually talk to the grad students and postdocs and people who are doing the research. And it's a little bit kind of what you're about to see here, which is a high-quality lecture. But yeah, we hope that you'll pick up some of our flyers, you'll come to some of our future events, follow us on social media, et cetera, et cetera. Thanks.
Yeah. So today we're going to hear a lecture by Jason, Austin, and Matka. And there are some pamphlets in the front which have some sort of important terms referenced throughout the talk, as well as speakers' bios. And so their talk is going to be split into 3 different sections, and we ask that you hold your questions until a specific question break. And then we're going to intermittent halfway through 10-ish minutes. And then at the very end, they're going to give a little demo. And when are you? So during, if you'd like to stay after the lecture and participate in the demo, you can sign up during the intermission. So,
and also during the intermission is a good time to fill out these surveys we have here. So like I said, we exist to kind of train graduate students. We're still learning to do this kind of thing, so we really appreciate feedback from audience members. Let us know what you think of kind of the whole event series or the lecturer's speaking style, anything. We have places for you to write suggestions for future topics, which we really do look at and take very seriously. And also information about kind of how you heard about this that is useful for us going forward. So please take the time, either during the intermission or at the end, to just quickly fill this out. We would really appreciate it.
So we'll let our speakers take it away.
All right.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. We're excited to be here. My name is Jason Nomberg. I'm a second-year PhD student in the program in virology here at Harvard. In my lab, I kind of study viruses that cause cancer.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming out. I'm Austin Manny. I'm also a second-year PhD student in the Harvard virology program, and I study viruses that infect parasites that infect people.
Hi everyone, welcome to Science in the News. My name is Magda. I'm also a second year in the virology program at Harvard. I study vaccine immunology, so I hope you really enjoy this presentation.
Great. So today we're going to be talking about the past, the present, and the future of our outbreaks. So Gates once said, if anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a high infection virus rather than not missiles, but microbes. 100 years ago, in 1918, the 1918 Spanish flu killed up to 100 million people. Now, on that high end, that may be as much as 5% of the world's population. Ebola, a virus that kills up to 70% of those infected, is continually emerging quite literally from the jungle. In the future, who knows what the viral outbreaks will emerge? But But there is hope. Let's look at this graph. So in this graph, we have the number of measles cases from 1944 to 2004. Measles is a very contagious and dangerous virus. Something interesting happened around 1964. You can see that the number of measles cases dropped off. What happened? Well, there was a vaccine introduced. In the span of a few years, measles virus, which used to cause hundreds of thousands of illnesses, was cut to almost nothing. Let's talk about a much more serious virus, smallpox. You guys don't really hear very much about smallpox nowadays. The reason is one of the only viruses that humanity has ever eradicated. But smallpox used to be around the world, and it used to kill up to 30% of those infected. I'll tell you the story about smallpox a little later. So for our talk, I will discuss some past outbreaks, one of which reaches into the present. Later, Austin will talk about more current outbreaks of Ebola and Zika. And finally, Mark will speak to the mysterious disease X and how we're going to predict and combat future epidemics. So for my talk, I'm going to explain what are viruses and what are outbreaks. Next, I'll talk about smallpox, which is the scourge of the human species. And finally, I'll talk about outbreak, are referred to right now as the mystery. But this mystery outbreak, I mean, it's not a mystery anymore, but it's a story and it's current even to this day. So what even are viruses? Well, they're not bacteria, and they're incredibly small. So I'm going to show a little video. And what's going to happen is we're going to start off quite big, about the size of coffee bean, and we're going to zoom in and just give you some scale and appreciation for how small viruses really are. So here's the coffee bean, like I said, this is very small. There's a skin cell, we're passing a red blood cell, even a chromosome. There's finally bacteria, right? Even smaller than bacteria are viruses. Viruses are incredibly small. Not only are viruses small, but viruses are simple.
There we go.
So all a virus is a genome or a set of instructions surrounded by a protein code. That's it. So in this cartoon, this is a cartoon of a virus. You can see that these kind of coils are genomes. And this genome is instructions on how to make more genome and more virus hosts. So they're incredibly simple. Not only that, viruses depend on a host for replication. Let me explain that a little bit more. So here, he's the virus and the cell. So this could be, for example, like one of a cell in, like on the back of your throat, for instance. When a virus, it delivers its genome or its set of instructions to the cell. This genome or set of instructions tricks the cell to making more virus parts and more virus genome. These virus genomes that are created can in turn make even more genome, more parts. You just have a cell that is just a virus machine, making a machine. This cell is just making virus. And eventually this cell will be killed. Viruses will be released. And these viruses can go on to infect more cells. For example, it can spread an infection in the back of your throat. Now, in addition to infecting cells, viruses can go on to infect people or even animals. I will say that mostly when we're talking about animal transmission of viruses, we're worried about when animals transmit viruses. That happens, and Martha and Austin will talk a little bit about that. Now, one thing I want to mention, if this viral replication is out of hand and many people are infected, we can have an outbreak, an epidemic, or even a pandemic. So let's consider a small town in the Northeast. Now, if there's an outbreak, let's say there's incidence of a disease, many people are getting this virus, and it's more than you would expect. We may call this an outbreak. Let's say this disease gets quite bad. It's spread over even a larger area, and many people are falling ill. This is what we would call an epidemic. And that's a worst-case scenario. This virus is infecting people all around the world in multiple geographic locations. This is a pandemic. This has happened many times. Let's make a few examples of some recent pandemics. Now, to start my talk, I want to talk about the virus that causes smallpox. Smallpox may have been with us for as many as 30,000 years. I'll tell you the story now. So, the 18th century English doctor Edward Jenner once said, smallpox, the most dreadful scourge of the human species. This is a picture of a smallpox particle. It looks funny, but it doesn't cause a very pleasant disease. Nearly 30% of people who were infected with smallpox would end up dying from the disease. This is an image from a 16th century book. It depicts a smallpox victim. The way smallpox progressed is first, people who are infected with smallpox have flu-like illness, but eventually they would develop this characteristic rash and these pimples all around their body. These pimples would be oozing pus, and they were very infectious. And the patients could get better, but they could also get much worse. Remember, we're talking about a 30% death rate. Now, like I said, smallpox may have been with humanity for as much as 30,000 years old, for 30,000 years. This is a 30,000-year-old mummy with evidence of a smallpox-like illness in these papules here. So, we have, besides the mummy 3,000 years ago, the first written evidence of smallpox is in written texts in China in the 3rd century. Smallpox is thought to have spread through trade, eventually making its way in the 11th century, Africa in the 15th, and the Americas in the 16th. Very soon, smallpox was a global disease. This was a true pandemic. I want to talk about Edward Jenner once more. I quoted him a little earlier. In the late 1700s, Edward Jenner made an interesting observation. He noticed that milkmaids who were infected with cowpox from their cows never got smallpox. So cowpox is a very similar virus to smallpox. But when people were infected with cowpox, it is a very mild illness. So Edward Jenner said, oh, that's very interesting. He did what scientists do, and he did an experiment. So this is a picture depicting what Edward Jenner did. So he took his gardener's son, and he, that's what you do now, but he took his gardener's son, and he infected his gardener's son, James, with cowpox. Then, it's obviously extremely illegal nowadays, and he exposed James to smallpox. And James was all right. James did not get infected. James was fine. So what this showed is James being infected by cowpox first protected him from smallpox in the future. This is the best of all vaccines. Vaccines train a person's immune system to recognize and fight the virus next time it sees it. So Dr. Edward Jenner kind of showed that vaccination works all around the world. People started vaccinating against smallpox. But it worked for like years before humanity made significant headway against smallpox. So thanks in part to vaccination, smallpox was eradicated in 1992 and in Europe a year later. In 1959, the World Health Organization began the smallpox eradication campaign. This campaign was to eradicate smallpox from the face of the earth. Thanks in part to this campaign, smallpox was eradicated in South America in 1971, Asia in 1975, and Africa in 1977. This is a picture of the last known case of someone naturally infected by smallpox. I think 1977 or 1975. Now, in 1979, the World Health Organization declared the world free of smallpox. The first time in human history, humanity had eliminated a disease from the face of the earth. Nowadays, the only smallpox officially reported to calves in Atlanta and also another lab in Russia. Note that I said officially reported to exist. In 2014, researchers at the NIH found a vial of smallpox just in an unsecured fridge. Imagine the scare, like it's not a fun discovery. Those vials were as old as 1950s. So I've explained smallpox, which has probably been with us for many thousand years. The next viral outbreak I'm going to talk about probably hasn't been with humanity for that long. It's thought to have been introduced early in the 1900s, once or twice, from monkeys, actually. So we know what causes this illness now, but at the start, no one knew what was going on. So the mystery began in the early 1980s. Some men developed a very rare skin cancer called Kaposi sarcoma. So some men having a rare skin cancer that is seldom seen except in the very elderly. All of these men were severely immunodeficient. It was found that, so basically the first cases were these groups of homosexual men. It was later found that whatever virus or illness is causing this disease can affect anyone and everyone. I'll explain more. Now, later on, even more people showed up with weird infections. This group of patients developed a kind of a very rare fungal infection called pneumocystis. So people are kind of getting like keyed on, something's wrong. All of these people are getting really rare infections, but no one knew what was going on at all. Even more kind of strange groups happened. Now, the CDC reported that there was all of these kind of strange infections even in infants. And finally, a year later, the CDC reported that whatever this kind of contagion was, it can actually transmit through blood transfusions. The CDC finally gave it a name, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, or AIDS. But what causes AIDS? People still didn't know. So the breakthrough came in 1983, when a group in France, led by Luc and Francois, discovered evidence of a virus in the immune cells from a patient who was about to develop AIDS. This virus went on to be called human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV. Discovering this virus was of critical importance. I want to remind you that before we knew what caused AIDS, there was absolutely no way we could treat it. No one knew what was causing it, and there's no way we can make medicine to prevent it. In addition, now that we knew what the virus was, we took blood to see if the blood was infected with HIV. And finally, now that we knew what the virus was, we could study it and we could make medicine. So in green are little HIVs budding out of blue, some cells. So in green are little HIVs just all over the place and coming out. HIV, even right now, there's no cure and there's no vaccine. It wasn't until 1987 that the first drug against HIV, AZT, was introduced. Before AZT, AIDS patients had nothing. Many of the AIDS patients before AZT would end up dying of opportunistic infections because they didn't have any medicine to help them. But AZT doesn't cure HIV. All it does is sends the virus into hiding. Nowadays, in modern days, patients get a cocktail of many HIV drugs. But the thing is, the virus is always just hiding. Whenever the patients stop taking the drugs, the virus will always come back. We haven't been able to cure HIV. But there is some good news. This is some data from the World Health Organization. In yellow, you can see the number of people newly infected with HIV. These numbers are finally decreasing, finally going down. In red, you can see the number of deaths due to AIDS. This number is also finally going down. So this shows we are finally making some headway against disease. I hope that in the future, we will be able to develop a vaccine. But you can ask me in the intermission why it's so tricky for this virus. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Yes, but what kind of questions? when a cell is infected, if the virus is so small, all the defenses go and attack the virus? That is one question. Another question is, there is some medicines that they are virus that you take it and supposedly kill the virus or something. So how they work? What do you think?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so the first question was, viruses are so small. How does your immune system like target viruses when they're so small? So there's several ways the immune system do it. There are special immune cells that recognize virus and produce a specific defense against the virus, called antibodies that go into your blood. Now another way kind of this happens is infected cells themselves basically stick out flags and say, hey, we're infected with the virus, keep us. And just recognize and target those cells. And his second question was, normally there are some antivirals or drugs you take to help fight a virus infection. And you wanted to know how that works, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So normally the way an antiviral works is it tries to mess up something that the virus does that humans do not. So some viruses do special things that we don't really do, so the drug will test the virus without hurting us.
We still immune children against.
No, so we don't was do we still vaccinate children against smallpox? Smallpox is officially eradicated than smallpox. So we don't give smallpox immunizations anymore.
Has there been any thought of destroying stockpiles in Russia and in the US?
Yeah, so that the question was, has there been any thought of destroying the smallpox stockpiles in Russia and the United States? So actually, the smallpox eradication campaign and many others really want those stocks destroyed. But there's kind of another argument, and that goes, what if there's some forgotten stock of smallpox and there's an outbreak? We need some samples to be able to study so we can make better medicine and so on. So it's actually like kind of there's yeah.
Wasn't one of the problems with HIV was that it attacked the immune cells that normally destroy things? And was there something, the CD4 or CD20 receptor? And are there certain people who are genetically less sensitive because they have different kinds of receptors? Some attempt to get a vaccine.
So the question was, HIV targets your immune system, and are there certain people based on certain properties they have that are more resistant to HIV based on their receptor properties? So the answer is to a point, yes. So HIV infects CD4 positive T cells. Don't worry about that. But so the thing is, some patients there's different immune molecules that everyone has. Everyone has different versions of these immune molecules. Some of them are very good at helping your cells fight against HIV. And in these people with HIV, HIV can still infect them, but it just takes a long time for HIV to really kill their immune system. The problem is, given enough time, it will happen.
For HIV, how is that vaccine?
Good question. So the question was, how is PrEP different than a vaccination for HIV? So a vaccination, the way that would work is to make your immune system ready to combat the virus. So basically what that would mean is you vaccinate a person, and now this person's immune system can fight the virus whenever it's seen. The thing is, the way PrEP works, so maybe for those who don't know, PrEP is a way to, for high-risk groups, people who may get HIV, it's drugs you can take to help reduce the chance you get HIV. The thing is, PrEP, all it is simply antiviral drugs, kind of like I mentioned earlier. These drugs don't really affect your immune system that much. All the drugs are directly by drugs. It's not training your immune system to do anything.
Red
year or two ago that an infant was seemingly in a HIV, its mother was. Is there a threshold at which Ebola can clear? So you mentioned there's no cure for it. It's just that as long as you're taking the antiviral medicine, it goes in hiding. Is there some threshold of no return to minimal viral count or something?
So the question was, like, is there at some point, like, if we intervene fast enough, is there a way to stop, like, cure someone from HIV infection? So basically, when they're infected, if we act super fast, can we cure them? So this has happened once for my older patient who, he happened to get actually a full, I think it was he got a stem cell transplant, and they actually transplanted in cells from a patient who had these immune molecules that were better at fighting HIV as well. And that's the only time this is, unfortunately, from what I understand, that's the only time it happened. For the majority of people, it's just too difficult to do it. It's very hard to achieve a cure when someone is infected.
So I think we'll let the next speaker take a second.
And today I'll be talking about the present of viruses. So what viruses we see today, or such years ago. And so in part one, Jason told you about some of the viral scourges of the Earth that has plagued humanity before. And in the next part, Mokta will tell you about what scientists are doing today to protect us from viruses tomorrow. But right now, I think it's worthwhile to reflect on some of the challenges we have faced most recently. By these epidemics that we have just gone through, we can see what we have learned in the past and what work still needs to be done. So, as we have moved forward in facing these infectious diseases, the public health landscape has shifted significantly. But as with most things, there are good things, there's the downside. So on the positive side, in the past 2 decades, there's been urban, which means that most places that people live are getting cleaner and less prone to viruses, so it makes it harder to thrive. The next is viruses. So people who come down with viruses can go seek treatment. And finally, there's in the past couple of decades, especially, there's a decline in water. So people have their access to food, water, shelter, and overall just a higher standard of living. And so with this, it makes them more ready to fight the virus that they encounter. However, moving from this, people these days are living closer together with exponential rise in the population of humans. People are being forced into tighter quarters, which makes it way easier for viruses to spread. Also, the same thing, people going into what was previously wild life areas, and so I'll talk about this more later. But basically, it's just an easy opportunity for viruses to jump from us into humans. And finally, with thousands of flights crossing the globe every day, it's a perfect opportunity for viruses to travel like they never did before. So the first virus I want to talk to you today is Ebola. You might remember seeing this on the news just a few years ago. So there was a huge outbreak in West Africa of Ebola that began in 2013. It spread into a full-blown epidemic and was continued pretty much unhalted until 2016. In this image, you see a public health worker in Guinea gowning up to help patients. And this 2013 to 2016 Ebola crisis was the most widespread epidemic of virus in human history. So by the end of the Ebola epidemic, 11,320 people ultimately died because of the disease. The the vast majority of these were in West Africa. However, there were isolated cases in other parts of the world, including the US. So one doctor, Craig Spencer, joined Doctors Without Borders and flew overseas into Africa to face the virus line. He returned home several months later to New York City on a cold October day, a Friday. 6 days later, he'd wake up with fever, chills, go to the hospital, and find out that he was infected with Ebola. This initiated a media frenzy, as we've heard here in the New York Post, about his quarantine and his situation. However, he ultimately recovered and resumed his normal job as an ER doc in Manhattan. Later that year, Time Magazine would call people like him the Ebola fighters, the Time Magazine Person of the Year, 2014. So what is Ebola? I've talked to you about like what was in the news and kind of on a global scale, but when you get right down to the molecular level, what is it? So it's a very virus with a mortality rate above 70%. If you remember from Jason talking about smallpox, that has about a 30% mortality rate. So Ebola is that much more infectious. Ebola is spread by direct contact with an infectious person's blood. And symptoms include severe bleeding from the eyes and the ears, vomiting, and diarrhea. It's like not a good time. So where does Ebola come from? So Ebola is found deep in the jungle, mostly lying dormant in bats. As the human population grows and people expand into these wilderness areas, they encounter animals that actually harbor the virus. Killing animals and preparing them for food exposes the hunters to the blood and antiviruses that might be there. And finally, after one person is visited, they can transmit it among the family and friends and wider community through direct contact with infected blood. So the 2013 crisis behind us, but this wasn't the first time that humanity has seen Ebola. Researchers think that Ebola, they pinpointed its first jump from animals to the humans in the early part of the 20th century. We have suffered outbreaks of this deadly virus before. In 1976, the first widespread Ebola outbreak occurred in Zaire, which is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Months later, a couple hundred miles away in South Sudan, there was a separate outbreak. And then in 1979, the virus reemerged. Fast forward 10 years, those outbreaks in Africa have taken over. And that brings us to the local down. So pictured here is an actual picture of a microscope picture of a closely related virus, the Ebola virus. Resin would begin as a mystery and end as a terrifying scare in one of our country's most populated areas. And a group of research monkeys mysteriously fell ill. So one monkey died, which sometimes happens. Then a second one, a couple days later, also found dead. And by the end of the week, up to a dozen monkeys were found dead in this research facility. So something was obviously going on. And so a government researcher was doing routine follow-up and took some tissue and looked at a microscope. And this picture is what he saw. It turns out that the monkeys were imported from the Philippines, where there might have been locally circulating outbreak of Ebola, of this Ebola-like virus, and then it was shipped across the globe and ended up at monkeys. It turned out no humans were ultimately infected in this whole fiasco, but it really resonated with people, and it would become the inspiration for the 1995 New York Times bestseller book, The Hot Zone, which is a nonfiction retelling of this account, and you can see it here on our handout. And so what changed? The series of outbreaks in the 70s and 80s were bad, but the 2013 Ebola outbreak was unprecedented. So what changed in the intervening about half century? So in the 1970s, the virus was mostly contained to rural areas where it had to spread It had recently emerged from animals just a couple decades before, in the early 1920s, so it hadn't really had time to adapt to humans. And there were many fewer internationals in Africa, so if there was, a local outbreak, it didn't really have that much opportunity to spread. Fast forward about 50 years, and 2013 outbreak occurred mostly in urban centers, the capital cities in these African countries, which let it go from a small outbreak to a full-blown epidemic. It had become more deadly and better adapted to infecting people, and again, the tens of thousands of flights every day, it was much easier to spread. And so while this 2013 Ebola crisis is over, a small outbreak circulated earlier this year in the DRC from May through July of this year. And then that was concluded in July 2018. There was a swift response there of it. And then a month later, across the country, there was yet another outbreak. That one is still ongoing. There's been 151 cases, over death. And scientists are monitoring it to see if this outbreak progresses to a full-blown epidemic. As we move forward, this professional, are working on the situation, they're monitoring it, and coming up with future strategies to better combat viruses like Ebola. So moving on, the next virus I want to tell you about is Zika. So this one is a little closer to home. You may recall it's a large epidemic in the Americas from 2015 to 2016. In contrast to Ebola, it's not outwardly deadly. People aren't bleeding in emergency rooms and stuff like that. But it can severe birth defect that I'll speak to in a minute. And there were confirmed cases across South America, the Caribbean, and even in the United States, in Puerto Rico, and Florida. So what is Zika? It was first discovered in 1947, the first outbreak 50 years later. Symptoms are very general. They include fever, rash, body aches, and actually up to 80% of people infected with the virus will never know they're infected. Particularly a threat to expecting mothers, because it causes this condition called microcephaly. And what that means is that newborn babies will come out with smaller head circumferences. Their heads are smaller, and this causes neurological developmental delays that will maybe last the whole time. And the last point on this is that there's no treatment available, either prevention or therapeutics. So how is Zika transmitted? It's a little different from Ebola, as you'll see. So it starts with an infection. Then a mosquito comes and bites that infected person and transmits it to an uninfected person. So the virus goes to the mosquito, bites this person, and then he becomes infected. This happens exponentially, and that's how you can get a huge outbreak, as we saw in 2015. And so one place where this outbreak occurred was in Rio de Janeiro at the 2016 Olympics. And this was really bad because Brazil has the kind of mosquitoes needed to transmit the disease in the manner I showed you. And so during the Olympics, key athletes for Jason Day and even tennis superstar Serena Williams either skipped the Olympics altogether or expressed serious doubt about them. Responses used for Zika. So how did we combat this? Especially with Ebola, just 3 years before, there were different responses, and people knew we had to take it seriously. So these therapeutics include cutting-edge technologies and more traditional methods. The New York Times covered scientists' efforts to genetically engineer mosquitoes in order to combat this outbreak. Engineer mosquitoes, what does that mean? It's something like this. No, it's a little more boring. Basically, they just made mosquitoes that would lead to offspring. So basically, you crash the mosquito population, and if there's less mosquitoes, there's less Zika virus. Also, there was less less savvy about it, like the old-fashioned cyberbullying, and that was used in widely populated areas like the Olympics and also Disney World. Fun fact: I went to Disney World during that time, and I got so much bug spray and mosquito repellent. It's great. It's a good souvenir. So compared to the 2013 Ebola crisis, the international response was much swifter, and they took it really much more seriously than Ebola, which is one of the reasons why it came in so quickly. So people realize investments in healthcare infrastructure and train and develop teams and coordinating internationally and locally can really help fight these diseases. And another reason why Zika came in so quickly, apart from the governmental side impacts, was improvements in diagnostics. And so, as Jason touched on, the genome is a part of the virus that transmits information, like DNA. And so, one way you can track viruses and kind of survey them and see how they move throughout a population is with DNA sequencing. So in 2013, this is what it looked like. It's about the size of an oven, mostly confined to academic laboratories, state labs, things like that. You move forward 3 years to the peak of the outbreak, and it looks something like this with this guy. Not the man up there, that's an astronaut who also uses sequencer in space. And the small circle is the Oxford Nanocore, and it's about a little bigger than the USB drive. And this means that it's cheaper, easier to take in the field, and you can actually do clinical patients. So you can test in real time in about an hour to see if someone's infected with Ebola, Zika, or the viruses of tomorrow. And last, what's going on with Zika today? So as I alluded to, it came in so quickly. At the peak of the crisis, we were seeing 35,000 cases of Zika a week. It crashed down to just a couple hundred cases, and this year there's only been 2 reported cases of transmission here in the United States. So researchers today are doing a lot of research on the virus, trying to understand what makes it tick, and more importantly, why did it stop at outbreaks or at the epidemic stage and not really go across the world or kill as many people as Ebola did. And so, with the threat of Zika mostly behind us, we can appreciate what an effective vaccine or effective outbreak looks like. What are the technologies that we can use to work? And as Maki will talk to you about next, what are scientists working on today that help us prepare for tomorrow? Thank you. Questions? Yeah. You have a question?
She wants to know how Zika in the world is it known why it's only due to
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question is, where did Zika come from, and why did it drop off so quickly? So Zika is thought to circulate in mosquitoes in mostly tropical areas, and the best reason they think of why it dropped off so quickly is it peaked right about wintertime, or in April, which is wintertime in the southern hemisphere, and so that ended up killing a lot of mosquitoes. And so if you kill mosquitoes, you can't transmit the disease. And also these prevention methods, like closing down airports and real-time monitoring, lets you have a better what's going on. But kind of the larger takeaway is we don't really know, and so that's why we're still studying. Yes.
If a man is infected with Zika and he's trying to get pregnant with a woman, then could the baby get microcephaly even if the woman doesn't initially?
Yeah, so it's if a couple is trying to get pregnant and the man contracts Zika, does that prevent the processing to the kid? And the answer is yes. So most of Zika transmission is through mosquitoes, but it can also happen through direct contact. And if a man has it, then they can actually carry it for 6 months and go on to the baby. Any more questions? Okay, I'll take one more. If you have any more, give me an intermission. Yes?
Just you were talking about current or contemporaneous viruses, right? Like Ebola and Zika.
Right.
So if the Ebola is like a 30% deadly rate, which one is the current virus that is at our time that is most deadly right now?
Right. So the question was, Ebola had a super high death rate, 70%. Are there any viruses that have a higher death rate at this moment? And the answer is yes. Rabies virus actually has close to 100% death rate if you become infected. The good news for that is that there's a treatment, so you get a series of vaccines within the first month, and it's really highly effective. But if you don't get the rabies vaccine after you're bitten by a rabid dog, something like that, you can certainly die. Good, yes. And now we're going to have our intermission, and so that'll be about 5 to 10 minute break, and then off. And yes, if you want to sign up for our demo afterward, which is a cool demonstration we're doing about viruses, you can sign up at the table here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, we should stop.
Suggestion.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you get engaged or what is that? Somebody can say like how likely is it from one Yeah, so a lot of people I get, they get we are ignorant. I got angry. Well, in my gallbladder, and I had so much pain, and the doctor started telling me, "Oh, I could give you some medicine for the pain." And I told them, I'm going to be like addicted with it forever. And they don't come up. Okay. Back on the I would keep on that, and then I was asking.
Yeah. That's good.
I would say I was. I mean, the zika place and you get like the fruit thing. But it can't be. I was last night.
That's a good idea. Like, oh yes. Yeah. But I would say in less than a week we'll have a higher quality. Yeah, that's actually a few days. Yeah. Yeah, and we go through it. We put the slides on the screen. Yeah, we just need to sync them up. Yeah. I didn't talk about
everyone, I think we are going to get started for the session of presentation. Thank you.
Whenever you guys are ready. Yes.
All right, everyone. So I'm Magda, like I said before, last speaker of the day. So let's get back to our exciting topic of viral epidemics. This topic is about past viral epidemics, including the deadly smallpox and HIV, and Austin talked to you guys about present-day epidemics like Ebola and Zika. And now I'm going to talk to you guys about the future of viral epidemics. So, if a deadly virus that can easily spread among people tomorrow, is the world ready to handle the epidemics that it may cause? If it spread and affected different regions all over the world, are we ready to handle a full-blown pandemic? Remember what Austin told us, this could easily happen. Our population has doubled within the last 50 years, and people live densely populated cities. Also, over 300,000 trips are made by air each day. So it would take long for a highly transmissible virus to spread all over the globe and fast. So this makes you wonder, is there any way we could predict how and where the next viral epidemic occurs? It does occur. How do we respond? Are we prepared? Are we ready to be able to treat people that are quickly falling into the illness? And also protect those who haven't been affected yet. So Bill Gates has already stressed the impact of the next epidemic. Remember, he said if anything kills over 10 million people within the next few decades, it's most likely going to be a highly infectious virus. So we don't expect this imminent threat, but the problem is we have no idea what it's going to be. So what should we even call it? The World Health Organization thinks we should call it ZX. So the ZX is basically the code name given to the currently unknown infectious threat that's going to cause the next serious viral international epidemic. On May 7th of this year, the World Health Organization added the ZX to the Blueprint Priority Disease List. So this list basically contains diseases that have potential to cause great public health crises but have no treatments or vaccines. And disease actions added to this to increase awareness and boost research efforts. And because people have acknowledged this, we now see highlights like this are the epidemics. This news clipping from months ago is questioning whether a bird flu in China could be disease X. This strain actually emerged and killed 38% of the 1,625 people that it affected. So, how do we prepare for disease X? First, we try to predict where and how this disease could emerge. And second, we need to organize different strategies to respond to the disease epidemic. So how are viral epidemic predictions being made? Epidemics are predicted primarily by studying viruses that are carried by animals because they are the primary source for new human viruses. Thus far, a total of 586 animal-virus associations have been made. And among all animals, bats, primates, and rodents carry the high proportion of viruses. And out of these three species, bats rank the first in the number of viruses they carry. So a key factor in predicting health is assessing the animal-to-human transmission risk. For example, if you recall, Ebola came from contact with infected monkeys, the virus like bats, that infected primates and other animals that eventually transmitted it to people. So there are different factors that contribute to the greater chance of animal-to-human transmission. The first one is geography. Geography can be used to predict viral epidemics by looking at where animals' significant amount of viruses are located. So in these maps, we can see regions with the greatest potential for future viral outbreaks. The darker here, the more concentrated the animals are in that area. So we can see here that some of the critical areas are the northern region of South America, where we find the highest concentration of bats, and the central eastern region of Africa, where we find the greatest number of primates. Another factor that influences transmission is actually climate change. Climate change factors in because as the planet gets warm, temperatures expand the range of virus-carrying animals that prefer the tropical climate. To this day, the continental US has escaped outbreaks like zika, dengue, and yellow fever. And this is mainly because Aedes aegypti, the mosquito that actually spreads these viruses, prefers the tropical climate. This mosquito is actually restricted to the Gulf Coast region of southern Florida in the US. But with climate change, now it's been identified as far north as Washington, D.C. Now, before I leave this slide, I would highly recommend you all to come to another Science in the News lecture or seminar on viruses. So, we talked about different ways to predict viral epidemics, but predicting the next epidemic with certainty is actually very challenging. And this is due to these two reasons. One is it's difficult to predict what can happen in nature at any point in time. There are many unpredictable ways new and deadly viruses occur. Also, second is the unpredictable nature of human behavior. People come across different virus carriers they've been exposed to. An excellent example of the unpredictability of nature is actually the emergence of new and dangerous viruses, a concept known as antigenic shift. So antigenic shift is a process by which two or more virus strains can combine to form new types with mixed properties. Here in this image, you can see a highly pathogenic avian or bird flu virus that just circulates in birds. Then it comes in contact with a human strain virus, and those two viruses can combine to form what is now a new highly pathogenic flu spread amongst people. The most recent 2009 H1N1 flu pandemic strain was actually the result of anti-infection. Alright, so and now that we've seen different ways the next viral epidemic could occur, let's shift to talk about the different strategies to cut the epidemics. We'll cover three strategies. The first one is improving real-time monitoring of emerging diseases. Second is building public health structure. And third is developing novel or new vaccine technologies. So let's start with the first strategy. So there are both global and countrywide efforts put forth in monitoring emerging diseases that could cause epidemics. Globally, the World Health Organization, or the WHO, keeps tabs on the number of disease cases and deaths for countries around the world. There are also regulations in place that require each country to report to the WHO when epidemic-prone diseases emerge. Within the U.S., the CDC similarly tracks disease cases and deaths and monitors personal health behavior of people by using different surveillance systems. The biggest issue with the overall global disease surveillance system right now is lack of technology in third world countries. This issue can easily be resolved by upgrading telecommunications in remote areas and introducing electronic laboratory. Now, the second strategy, improving public health infrastructure, is a big undertaking. And here, by public health infrastructure, what we're talking about is the hospitals, the laboratories, as well as the trained healthcare professionals that are responsible for providing healthcare to people. So the public health infrastructure in most countries is actually lacking in the need funding and support. Until an epidemic occurs, most governments don't realize how important it is to invest in their healthcare. And once the epidemic occurs, this actually end up being a lot more financially. For example, zika could end up costing Latin America and the Caribbean about $8 billion. And the Ebola outbreak in West Africa actually cost $5 billion to control. And countries affected by the virus actually lost around $2 billion in GDP or economic growth. So the government most governments should increase funding out there so that they are prepared when epidemics strike. Now let's move on to the last strategy. The novel or methodology is epidemics. Here I'm going to remind everyone of what Jason told us at the beginning of this talk, which is that vaccines have done an incredible job at protecting us from many diseases that people used to die from in the past. It's not just measles virus that vaccines have helped control, as Tom described. They've also helped control viruses such as polio, HPV, and hepatitis. According to the CDC, vaccines have actually helped prevent 20 million deaths worldwide. And so vaccines are the most effective tool we can use in combating epidemics. But the only issue with vaccines, though, is that they take a long time to develop and produce. As you can see in this table, they can actually take over 20 years. So this brings the question, if the next epidemic were to hit tomorrow, how long would researchers need to develop a vaccine for it? And how long would we produce enough of it for everyone? An effective vaccine would need to be one that we can produce quickly and one that can be made available for the public fast. And here's where the recently developed synthetic vaccines come. Synthetic vaccines are very quick to make. These vaccines are basically vaccines synthesized made of genetic materials we talked about earlier, DNA and RNA. So how are synthetic vaccines faster made than other vaccines? So to understand this, we need to learn to understand how vaccines work. So most old vaccines are basically dead or weakened viruses. So when we did a weakened virus vaccine, it's injected to the body. The body thinks that the weak virus is a threat and builds up antibodies. So antibodies are basically the ninjas of the body system. So next time a live virus actually infects the body is ready to fight it. So making a weakened virus into a vaccine actually is important. But here's an idea. What if we could just inject the body with the instructions to make the required virus by using DNA or RNA? Making RNA and DNA molecules is very simple and it's a very quick process. And that's why synthetic vaccines are actually harder to make. So with that, we'll kind of end our talk here with one last message to give you guys. And it is to take your vaccines. Even the most sophisticated vaccines are produced, it doesn't matter if the majority of us don't take them. If only some of us are vaccinated, viruses get a chance to swamp us. This will these are graphics found on this website from The Guardian. Before I put it up, let me use the graphics, right? So the blue dots here are the vaccinated people. The yellow are not vaccinated. And the red is the disease or the whole foods. So also pay attention to the different communities with different vaccination rates. You can see in Oakland County of Washington, they have around 50% vaccination rate. And in Gadsden County in Florida, they have a very aggressive 99.10% vaccination rate. So let's go over to the website. It's pretty cool. All right, goes pretty fast, so you don't have to keep up with it. You see how the virus kind of easily infiltrates these communities that have low vaccination rates? See how everybody's getting sick because the majority of the people aren't infected. See, that's a see the more vaccinated communities are more resistant to viruses coming in and infecting. See, Orange in California is doing pretty good, even though there are a few people that haven't been vaccinated. Those who are vaccinated are protecting the people that haven't been vaccinated in our society. And that's an example that shows you how, the more people are vaccinated, the more effective vaccines are in those communities. I'm going to run this one more time, and with that,
Are you assuming 100% effectiveness in that?
what is that?
There's a question of the effectiveness of the vaccine.
Oh, excellent. Yes. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Yes. So, vaccine development is actually a very process. Different versions of a vaccine are produced to make sure that they're actually effective. There's a threshold that a vaccine has to be effective before it can be. So, yeah, in this case, we're definitely assuming that the vaccine is definitely effective 100%.
Contrast flu vaccines,
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I'll repeat the question. So he's asking about the efficiency of these vaccines. So if we do get our immunizations or our vaccines, are we sure to be protected? And flu virus is kind of a different scenario. With most viruses, if you do get vaccinated, you will be protected against that virus. You'll develop an immune response, a long-term immune response that will protect you. Of course, you have to make sure to get your boosters. But with flu, the thing with flu is, like I told you, we just look at antigenic shift, right? So the flu virus mutates in all kinds of ways, and it changes drastically. There's so many strains out there. And so vaccinating people, most of the time, yearly vaccinations are geared to protect people from the flu virus that researchers are going to. So if the immunizations you got that year aren't exactly for the flu viruses that, the researchers kind of developed the vaccine for, the chance that you still get the flu. But a really interesting new research that's going on right now is, have you ever heard of the universal flu vaccine? They're working on it at in New York. Basically, this universal flu vaccine is supposed to protect you from all and any flu strain out there. And they use parts of the flu that are very critical that can't be mutated so that you can develop immune response against those parts of the virus so that you're protected against any flu strain out there. But more often than not, the regular seasonal yearly flu that we get, they protect against most flu vaccines, most flu strains, but not like all. So that's the question. Yeah. So yeah, didn't get into it too much, but yeah. So this is basically the whole graph is kind of constructed for the measles, how measles spread amongst different communities that haven't or have been vaccinated against it. So measles could potentially come back because some communities are not being diligent about taking their measles vaccine, and this is actually a great concern right now. So, yes.
In our country, public health is often a local responsibility, public health infrastructure rather than a national.
Oh, okay.
Right? Is that true?
So the question was, is it true that developing public health infrastructure is more of a local effort than it is a national?
Well, in our country, isn't it?
So I think it's so there are some guidelines, there's some standards that are set for national, like that the federal government would expect out of each state. But I do think that public health infrastructure could vary from place to place. It's a little bit of both. Yeah.
Can they genetically engineer so that the disease affects one another? If you
So the thing is, could you, are you asking if we could mutate viruses and to see if, okay, that's an excellent point. Can viruses actually, infect each other, right? Is that kind of, okay. So viruses are actually, they're not living or dead. They actually need a living cell to replicate and to actually be able to. So it's very unlikely for one virus to infect another. It's actually never happened. Okay, maybe Austin. Yeah, we can talk later. But so for a virus to be able to, usually viruses affect living organisms, living cells that they could replicate it. So that's kind of, but we can talk about it later. There might be a few examples of that. Thank you, guys. You've been an excellent
All right, so if you're interested in staying for a few more minutes for taking the demo, you want people to come down here?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so come down to the front, and if you are to fill out the surveys, we would really appreciate it. And thanks for coming out.
Yeah, so it's actually parasite, so it's a little guy. Yeah, the zombie. So yeah.
Yes, it's still attached to the camera, which I put on the floor there. Huh? Oh, we should end that. Bye, Internet.